Thank you. There we go. Good morning. Welcome to our legislative coffee this morning. This is our final legislative coffee of the year, and we are excited to have a good panel of legislators here with you today. As we get started, I'll introduce myself. I'm Matt Allen. I'm a member of the Garden City Chamber Government Affairs Committee, and I'll be moderating today's event. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this event: St. Catherine Hospital, Compass Behavioral Health, Garden City Community College, Finney County Farm Bureau Association, and Fry Eye Associates. If you are an associate or a part of any of those organizations, would you please rise and be recognized? Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce Chairman's Circle sponsors. Those are Commerce Bank, Dairy Farmers of America, the City of Garden City, and Golden Plains Credit Union. If you're part of those organizations, would you please rise and be recognized? All right, 3 minutes in, and I've already got an ovation. You didn't stand though, so there's still work to do. We have the Government Affairs Committee members are listed in this legislative agenda, which those of you that sat at a table should have a copy available to you. They're listed on the back, I believe. No, they aren't. Oh yeah, they are. Maybe not. Anyhow, if you're a member of the Government Affairs Committee, would you stand and introduce yourselves, please? I'm on that committee for maybe the next hour, I think, and then my tenure's done, and I'll be turning that spot over to somebody else, but my name's Matt Allen. I'm with the City of Garden City.
Hi, I'm Lisa Sutherland with Compass Behavioral Health. I'm Susan Nestor, Protocol Vancouver Real Estate Trust. President at ARC Real Estate.
This is a hardworking committee. They put a lot of time and effort into this legislative agenda, and then also to hold forums like this one, and then also as we enter into campaign season, having forums where candidates can discuss their different platforms and make those known to the voters. So we really appreciate the work of that committee over the years, and in this year in putting together this legislative agenda and these forums, which have been very successful. I'd also like to recognize the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, another hardworking group. They are listed on this legislative agenda, but I would like them to stand and introduce themselves as well. And there will be some repeats, but... Thanks, Andy. All right. Thank you all. We sure appreciate it. This legislative agenda lists 8 topics. The committee had an idea this year to divide up the four legislative copies to focus on 2 of those each in order as they progress from the left of the document to the right of the document. That would make
forgive me. My understanding and my recollection, it was primarily geared at counties of 10,000 or less. So I'm not sure how much benefit we will receive in Finney County, but I know that there is some, or at least I have been told. We passed the online gambling bill. I voted no on that for reasons that I certainly will answer if anybody asks. There are lawsuits now pending in that it's alleged that it violates our contracts with the casinos. As to Health and Human Services, we did pass a mental health 911 prevention bill. Not 911, it's 988. And that has finally been funded over some controversy going on there. So we have a serious problem with suicide in Kansas along with fentanyl deaths. And we're going back very shortly. Let's see, I'm sorry. Getting Kansas back to work bill. We overrode that bill that the governor passed. The Parents' Bill of Rights was not overridden, and the fairness in women's sports was not overridden. I have some statements about the upcoming veto session, sine die session, that since the court has ruled on our redistricting maps, it will only be one day, and we will have some veto issues arising on that day. And I'm happy to answer any questions because I want to make sure there's plenty of time. And I also do welcome my friend Representative Stephen Johnson and Senator Tyson. Thank you for coming to Garden City. We appreciate your presence and your interest in our community. And with that, I'm ready to answer any questions at some point.
Good morning. I'll try not to tap on the podium. Dr. Bill Clifford, representing District 122. For me, still the defining issue, as I've said every forum, is value in both. The amendment which is on the August ballot. Since the Hodes decision in 2019, giving an unlimited right to abortion, and two of our important laws have been overturned by out-of-state attorneys coming to argue in Kansas courts. One is that abortion clinics are not subject to health inspection. Dr. Fry's in the back. He and I are eye surgeons. Our facilities are subject to no-notice health inspection and safety inspection for the health of our employees and our patients, and that has become void in Kansas because of the Supreme Court decision in 2019. They've also overturned the live dismemberment abortion. I'm a physician. I find that procedure ghastly at best. We had conscience outs in medical school, so I did not participate in abortions, but having seen what spontaneous abortions of preterm infants look like in the operating room, it's very unpleasant. So I would tell you that for me, I do not choose to live in a state which allows such things, and I hope you don't either. And I would ask you to go vote yes in August, because I do think this is the defining issue of our generation for future generations. Keep in mind that the primary is only 73 days away. Early voting will start 50-something days from now, so this is real, folks, and I hope we get a great turnout in August. We do have an opportunity to go back to speak and override the governor on two particular issues where we had 84 House votes and 27 in one and 26 on the other in the Senate. However, I'm not sure that we'll have enough people in the chamber because of other obligations members have made. But as Representative Wheeler said, we'll see what happens on Monday. I look forward to your questions. I'll give my time to the Senator from Lynn County, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. I'm just going to introduce our guests really quickly for everybody's benefit. Senator Karen Tyson is Senator of the 12th District. She's from Parker, Kansas. Her counties include Allen, Anderson, Franklin, Lynn, and parts of Bourbon and Miami counties. So for point of reference, those towns would be Ottawa, Iola, Osawatomie, Humboldt, and a host of others. And she can share more about her district and also her views on the legislative session for us. Senator Tyson, welcome.
Thank you, it's nice to be here. That's kind of you guys, I'm a little bit shorter than these gentlemen. You know, but dynamite comes in small packages, right? So, yes, I'm Senator Tyson, and I do live in the eastern part of the district. I was born in Norton, and my father, we traveled a bit, he was in construction. We landed in Glasgow, Kansas, that's where I graduated high school. And I went to Dodge City for a couple years. I was at St. Mary of the Plains, and then K-State. I got bachelor's in computer science and math from K-State, and then from KU later on in my IT software engineering career, I got my master's from KU in engineering management. So I have a technical background. My husband and I own and operate Tyson Ranch, 5th generation on the ranch. My husband is, and a lot of history for his family. My family is not political. In fact, if you want bipartisan, my mom and dad are Democrats. You know, I'm Republican, but not partisan, just we work on issues and solving problems. But my husband, I was sworn in 100 days to the year as my husband's great-grandfather was sworn into the House. I was sworn in the Senate. So a little bit of history there. I love Kansas. You make connections wherever you're at, and that's what's great about Kansas. The legislative session, I'm very interested in what you guys think in this area. As tax chair from the Kansas Senate, I listen to people throughout the state, and that's how we solve problems. And we were able to pass many pieces of tax legislation in the last 2 years. One of them, most notably and most recently, was Conference Committee Report 2239, CCR 2239. It had several pieces of tax legislation in it at the end of the year, and some of those will impact you in this room. One of them, I talked to a couple of teachers. There's a tax credit. You guys may not believe this, but in Kansas, teachers don't get reimbursed for their out-of-pocket expenses. You would think that the schools would be reimbursing them, but that doesn't always happen. So there's a tax credit now at the state level up to $250 for teachers on their school supplies. I've listened to many family and friends complain about this issue for years and took action this year on it. The other thing in the room that probably most notably for this room in rural Kansas, we were able to remove sales tax on fencing material. You didn't pay it on most other equipment, but you did on fencing. So we were able to get that removed. It was because of the disasters that kicked off this conversation. We were going to remove the sales tax on fencing material for the fires. We went ahead and removed it completely. There were many other things in the tax bill. We froze property tax for senior citizens, low-income senior citizens, and disabled veterans. It's to help Kansans stay in their home. We already had 2 programs, the Homestead, Safe Seniors, and we expanded, you could call it Homestead B option. So I look forward to, obviously you can tell I'm waiting on tax. I look forward to your questions and look forward to visiting with you after. And thank you to the Chamber and all of the sponsors for everything. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite Representative Stephen Johnson. He's representative of the 108th District in Kansas. That's parts of Rice, Ellsworth, Saline, and McPherson counties. So from this area of Kansas, Stephen Johnson.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to all of you. Thanks certainly to our sponsors, but thanks to everyone who shows up to engage. It's been exciting to continue to learn more about the Finney County area and everything that's been going on here since I've been coming out somewhat regularly in 2013. Entered the legislature in 2011, grew up in Saline County, 5th generation farm there. My brother and I still operate that, and my nephew is taking it over, so that is encouraging as well. I went on to K-State and then into financial services. My MBA is in finance at the University of Chicago, and I worked in that field full-time until 2013. Started in the legislature in 2011 and continued to work in financial services, but just have my licenses and handle a few family accounts on that end. In the legislature this year, looking to the health and education side, I'll mention a couple of things that I touched, and then where I work is just in looking at the liabilities and the finances of the state and how we might deal with those over time. And we had a lot of opportunities in this last year. And I'll second what my colleagues have said so far as well. So thanks for covering a lot of the issues that were there. On the health front, at the bottom of it, I noticed the 340B issue. And that has been a tough one ongoing across the board. I chair the insurance committee, and we do not handle the 340B issue directly, although it is included with a number of things that are happening with the pharmacy benefit managers. This year, we managed to pass the first bill that would provide some oversight of pharmacy benefit managers. The goal of that was to provide oversight through registering them and then looking at the pricing structure to make sure they didn't have the opportunity in their own line of owned pharmacies or mail order opportunities to undercut local pharmacies and how they set the pricing structure. So as a first step, to start looking at how we integrate with that, still have a joint focus on minimizing costs to consumers, but also look at making sure programs like 340B are protected over time. So there's still work to be done there, but it was the first step in the bill that we were able to pass with the help of all of my colleagues through this year. On the education side, one of the things we had been working on in the 529 area, and I'd worked on the 529 advisory board for Ron Estes and Jake LaTurner. I'm not currently on that board, but when the shift had happened that we could use 529 plans for K-12 in addition to college saving plans, where you can now use it for up to $10,000 per year on K-12 expenses, we're wanting to make sure that A, people know how they might be able to use it, and B, the portfolios are aligned in a manner that meet the shorter term objectives and are set up to best serve the people of Kansas. And that's work that I'd assume we'll pick up and continue on. In the financial waterfront, we entered the year with the biggest surplus any of us have seen, $3 billion. How do you handle that? One of the things that we were all focused on was how do we reduce liabilities? And Representative Wheeler mentioned the CAPERS payment. The first thing was to look at reducing debt, because by reducing debt, we were able to reduce ongoing streams of payment, which allowed us to do more over time with those dollars. The CAPERS funds were there for two reasons. One, it was our highest interest cost debt. And the other, you can pay it at any moment in time. You can drop money in there. It actually worked really well. In working with the Senate, and they brought good ideas to the table also, it actually went to $1.125 billion, and it's being paid over time. Thankfully, the first and major payment went in on Friday. If you've been watching the market, I'm very glad it didn't go in before Friday. But it was $524 million that went in. Another $300 million will go in on June 1st, and the rest of the money will go in most in August, and the last $125 million after consensus revenue in November, assuming that the Finance Council approves that payment. That combined with those additional dollars, and Representative Wheeler gave you the interest cost savings. The first year savings is $94 million in next year's budget, and then it's just over $100 million per year going forward from there. So that's a meaningful change in what the budget will be. We also looked at other debt. There's $333 million in other bonds that are callable within the next 2 years. We set aside money to be able to pay off those bonds. That is the intention. It is possible that that could be redirected to something like the CAPERS debt, those higher interest cost debt at that time, but that was done. Another major thing that was done is a rainy day fund had been set up previously so that there were dollars to carry us through if there's a revenue shortfall. What happens if this downturn is prolonged? Well, 750 million is now set aside. There's 80 million going in, so 750 will be the total after this year. Again, thanks to all of our work in the legislature that can backfill if revenues come up short going forward. So far, they are not. Our last month's revenues came in strong. It looks like we're ahead again for the month of May, but that can change, and at some point it will change. Nonetheless, it looks like everything is still on track financially in that area. Those were the three major things as we looked at liabilities. If you added that up, it's a little over $2 billion that was applied just to take care of liabilities and put us in a better financial position, as opposed to doing other things with those dollars where they might disappear permanently, if that makes sense. Here it is able to be applied in an ongoing manner that is useful. So excited about that. One other thing, a year ago, we had an issue with the unemployment trust fund, right? That was, I'll just say, a disaster. And a lot of people worked on that from a policy end. The one thing I was assigned was to figure out what do we actually have in there, and based on that, what do premiums have to be for getting us back on track. A year ago, January, we couldn't even find out what the balance was in the fund. It had been going down so fast. We didn't know if we had to borrow. Turns out we were close to 200 million at the bottom when we had a chance to see the smoke clear. But the Department of Labor had asked for a sizable increase in employer contributions to refill the fund. One of the things, again, we all did was backfill that with some of the federal dollars for the dollars that were lost to fraud. So the dollars lost to fraud were backfilled from the federal dollars. We did have a high period of claims. We've been followed by a low period of claims. The legislature last year, after looking through those flows, did not implement the increase on employers that was recommended by the Department of Labor. In fact, last week, we've identified that premiums will actually be able to be reduced going forward between 50 to 70 million per year, and we will probably be back to $1 billion in the trust fund. Well, the projection is that we'll be back by the end of July, and we'll be back in a stable place there. So a number of pieces of good news on the front. Thanks to the work with my colleagues, I think we've steered that ship more steady than we otherwise would have through that. It needed to be changed back in August with the patch that was installed in January. Not getting into too much detail. But there's some good news on different fronts there, and look forward to your questions and any chance to work with you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. And at this time, we will accept questions from community members joining us in person and also on Facebook. So if I could ask Lisa, would that be all right if you would help me on this? Lisa Southern from our Government Affairs Committee will pass the microphone around. So if you'll raise your hand, we'll try to keep track of the order in which they come up, and you can ask your questions to the legislators. You may all answer the questions if you want to. If there's some that you want to take a pass on, that's permissible too.
Bob Kreitzer. There was a big splash when the ARPA funds came out. There was approximately $1 billion that was highlighted, and there was a big select committee of 40 people that were broken into 4 groups of 10. And they were going to distribute this and figure out the best way to benefit the people of Kansas who had been impacted by COVID. As we watch this happen, money just keeps disappearing from that billion. Some of it goes here, some of it goes there. Will there be anything left to actually give to the people who were impacted by COVID? And, you know, we're almost a year into the history of that money. When might something like that happen?
Well, I'll be glad to take that. You know, what's interesting, I watched some of those committee meetings too, and the input from the committee meetings were often disregarded also. So just for your information, the COVID money and Spark money that's come in, I requested a legislative post audit. We need to know where that money's going. One of the things that in the question, I can give you an example. There was grant money that was given out to almost every single locker plant in the state of Kansas except for one. And that plant had been in business over 30 years. So what criteria, and I asked the department, or the members of the committee, what criteria did you use to establish this grant money? And they couldn't give me the details or the information, but what they did do was they got this plant that didn't receive any money, they got them some money. But it makes you question the process, how they're deciding where the money's going, so that's why I requested the legislative post audit. And one of the things, businesses were shut down. Our governor shut down businesses. And so they still had obligations. They had property tax and other obligations and tried to continue operating. What we did this year, and I ran an amendment on the Senate floor, and we've got it in a final bill. Word is we're going to be able to vote on that May 23rd when we go back. And hopefully, one person doesn't get anything done. But this will allow small businesses or any business that was shut down during COVID to apply for up to $5,000 property tax relief. So that will ensure that the money is getting to people that need it and that were harmed by COVID. We need more programs like that. We talked about the unemployment system. That system is a wreck. I'm a software engineer. I can tell you, the chairman from the House, Representative Sean Tarwater, called me, and we specifically went through that unemployment bill line by line and made changes and created an unemployment oversight committee. I was appointed to that committee, and one of the things that we did was we put out an RFP, a request for proposal, for an audit of the unemployment system. We got a partial results last week, and believe me, anybody in technology, they would tell you that there are major problems with that system, but you don't have to be in technology. You guys know that that system was an absolute wreck, and it has been for years. What we did though, the Unemployment Council recommended to the governor, and I'm jumping subjects a little bit, but this is money that needed to get to Kansans that were without their jobs, the unemployment system. So we did use some of that money to shore up the unemployment system, and it is in good shape, the financial portion of it, but the technology portion still is not. And the council recommended that the governor put that out for bid again, open it up, because the request that was written was authored so bad, so poorly, that when they were cutting posting from other states, they didn't take the word Texas out. So that just gives you an idea how bad it was. But it was, so we recommend they open that up. There were only 4 companies that bid on it. 2 of the companies that bid on it, the states that used them, would not even ask those companies back to their state. We don't know which 2 they were. And the 2 that were left, the other 2, they had issues too. They were extremely expensive and not what the state was looking for in a product. She went ahead and awarded it, and she awarded it to her second choice, which is a company that is headquartered in India. I don't even need to speak to what problems, you guys can tell. We've got issues with the state, we've got management problems, and we've got to get this under control. I'm anxious to see the legislative post audit, because that will help answer your question. Did the money get to the people that actually needed it? But we are going to get at least some relief, $56 million for property tax relief.
So thanks for the question, and I agree, the legislative post audit is a good start to get an idea on where some of those things have gone. But as we just focus on that $1 billion and the money that came from the federal system, when federal money comes, it goes through the executive branch. The state general fund is overseen by the legislature. That's now over $8 billion. The federal funds that come each year, which is now over $14 billion, goes through the executive branch and is dedicated for transportation, education, et cetera. In these funds, there was $1 billion for the state, there's roughly $1 billion for local government that came into Kansas, there was roughly $1 billion, $1.2 billion for education that came in, and those funds went direct there, and how we spend all of those matter. The biggest initial spend that I saw in most of those areas was actually on technology. That may have been a justified fit. Now, if you want to tune into any committee meetings remotely, you can, because that is an exciting way to spend a day, right? But it can be helpful to actually, if there is an issue you're working on, if the 340B is something you want to tune into, you can get that online due to changing technology so that all of us could participate remotely. That's a drop in the bucket of the money. But I think to start, things did go to more COVID-related things, and then it became, how do we give away the money? And that's where we get into trouble, and are still in trouble. And as we talked earlier, the money in the Commerce Department and how that was split geographically, there are a lot of questions for us to ask and see if we can still influence it. There are a handful of legislators that are on the committee, but as was mentioned before, the committee decisions can be disregarded in how those dollars are allocated, and we have to just keep asking questions. So thanks for the question.
Hi, I'm Tracy Davis, a Finney County resident, City of Hopewell. I had some questions on the billion-dollar entities that were going in that were going to be given tax relief and that was anonymous. How many of you voted in favor of that? And you don't believe that that's non-transparent to the people of Kansas? And did those entities go in eastern Kansas? I mean, you're talking about our fiscal responsibility right now, how our taxes are going up, how we're not having very good fiscal responsibility the way it is. And now you're giving tax breaks to billion-dollar companies in eastern Kansas? It doesn't make sense to me.
You all don't mind if I take this first?
Sure.
Okay, thanks Tracy for bringing this issue up. So what the administration brought to the legislature was what you described, something that was focused on possibly one company and likely going to eastern Kansas. And again, Sean Tarwater mentioned earlier, Commerce Committee Chair, he and his committee actually morphed that into a tool, which we call APEX. And the APEX tool is an economic development tool to bring companies willing to make those multi-billion-dollar investments in Kansas to our state. I voted yes because I'm concerned about the population of Kansas declining. We almost lost the 4th congressional seat after the last census. We had just enough people to keep our 4th congressional seat and thus federal representation. I'm worried that in the 2030 census, we will drop below as other states grow, even if we hold steady, and we'll be down to 3 congressmen. So that was really my motivation. You can be assured that we in the Western Kansas delegation are looking out for Western Kansas as much as we can, but certain things are not going to come here. But if there's an opportunity through the APEX tool to get a multi-billion-dollar company to Western Kansas, we will be working hard. I noticed Lana Duvall, our Economic Development Director, isn't here. I mean, there have been contacts with companies from outside the country coming to the U.S. trying to set up multi-billion-dollar agribusiness. We will work to get that in Western Kansas. So you're correct, there's confidentiality in economic development. I don't think one of us here, I won't speak for Senator Tyson, but we're on the 3 House member side, we weren't read in to know who the company was, but I was in favor of the APEX bill as a tool for economic development.
So thanks for the question, and that was one that we all needed to do a lot of study on. So as you tried to work through that, benefit east versus west, trying to define what is the value of this company and what does it bring to the state is then what a couple of the folks work to do. So certainly the governor's office and Secretary Toland reached out early and did their explanation of how it worked. I said both Representative Clifford and I sit close to Representative Sean Tarwater, and he was one that I relied on heavily for that. I did not sign the non-disclosure to find out who the company was. I believe I could have done that if I wanted to know who it was, but I went and talked to Sean. Sean went and toured the plant. And I said, Sean, does this work? And one thing, Sean is a good legislator. He is a conservative legislator. It is unusual for Chairman Tarwater and Lieutenant Governor Commerce Secretary Toland to agree on big issues. And they were firmly in agreement from having been boots on the ground to walk through and say, so how does it work? Well, the first thing that the House did, and likely the Senate too, I don't know what the Senate Commerce Committee did, was slow down that $1 billion investment to say you're going to get that over not only 10 years, but there's going to be clawbacks that go 15 years if more is not produced than the value of those dollars that are allowed to help you make that investment in Kansas. The other piece, so on itself, by slowing that down, by requiring growth that is there to be able to get the help with investment, that helps to neutralize the billion. But for that entity to exist, the businesses that will have to be located around it, both from a vendor, a direct vendor standpoint, as well as a coffee shop, a restaurant, a hotel, the economic driver from that and the revenue from that will far exceed what we're able to get on very conservative measures. Does that matter to Western Kansas? It does. In that, total revenue in the state pays total bills in the state, and the biggest place that we see that is education. Now, Garden City is not as big a recipient of that as other rural areas are, to be fair. But based on the numbers that I was able to get from two very different perspectives, I believe that should that happen, it would be a win for Kansas. The longer it goes, the less certain I am that it's going to happen and be an issue. But I think the growth that presents, not only from the population side that was mentioned, but from the economic side is there. Yes, it would be nice to know, but that wasn't an option in that particular deal, or others that are similar to that. And it is hard. Had I not had the chance to walk into the offices of those two and have that confidence, yeah, how do you have confidence? It's $1 billion, trust me. Because that's what it feels like.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So based on that, and glad to provide more of the color behind the details of at least the numbers to where it is useful. I am very hesitant to say that a lot of our economic dollars are the way the commerce dollars are allocated work. I believe this one, if we get that plan, will pay out for the state based on the information those who had seen the details had. So, but thank you for the question. That's a big deal.
Could there have been any discussion on using existing Kansas contractors to help with this project? Or to utilize their sources?
So in terms of, so the company itself will be doing their business. In terms of contractors to build, contractors to do, I'm not sure where they'll come up with the entire labor force to do that. It will be incredible, and I think it'll be all hands on deck from a wide region to be able to build out and do those things, should it proceed. Okay.
Someone else would like to address it. I'm just up here to create a pause for Mike and took something with the microphone. I'll use it as a reminder. If you do have a follow-up question, ask for the mic for the benefit of the other people in the room and for the people viewing on Facebook, but try to get your question in all at once. So Representative Wheeler, do you want to take Tracy's question?
Thank you, Tracy, and I intend to be brief with this. I did not sign a non-disclosure agreement. They wouldn't have allowed me to know anything anyway, because it was very, very secret and held secret. I do not recall that it indicated that it would be in eastern Kansas. But one could deduce that from contents of the bill. $300 a day for hotel rooms for people to come and study to be an employee. I think we reduced that down some, if I do recall by amendment. $80 a day, if I recall, for food. I wanted to vote no on that, just because I, just like you, don't like the fact that we're in the dark. And it's kind of rolling the dice. However, I've never won anything at gambling anyway, and I believe in this one, we're gonna lose. If speculation is that it is in Johnson, Kansas, at the still polluted ammunition site in DeSoto, Kansas, and that particular business, if speculation says it will be a battery manufacturing place, which is one of the most polluting things there is. And my daughter is a speech pathologist at the school at DeSoto, so the school's going to explode. I voted yes on the roll of the dice, that I was hoping that it would be an aircraft plant in Wichita. And I always look first for the good of my constituents, but secondly, as a legislator, you have to look at the good and the welfare of the state. And if we acquired this industry, which is so large, it would be good for the state, except that I don't believe the future of electric cars are going to be all that good. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. There's 165 legislators in Kansas, you guys. You're not gonna agree with everybody all the time. I don't agree with my husband all the time, you know that. I mean, you probably know that as your spouse, but, so I have a little different take on this. What was interesting, I'm on the Commerce Committee and I'm on the Senate Chairman of Tax. This was a tax bill. It was a tax incentive program for a company, for one or two companies in the state of Kansas. But instead of sending it through the tax committee, they put it through the Commerce Committee. That in itself should be a flag. So when I was on the Commerce Committee, I tried to run a couple amendments. I got it on, and we got it past the Senate the first time. Not these gentlemen, but other House members reversed the position. And one of them in that bill is a refundable tax program. Most of you may not know what that means, but that word refundable is very important. It means you can get back more state income taxes than you paid in. When I started as a freshman in the House, we had over 18 refundable tax programs. I have been working to remove those, and we're down to about 7 or 8 now. This bill increased it by 1. It created a refundable tax program for this corporation, whatever corporation it may be. So that means Kansas taxpayers will be writing a check to this company to come to Kansas. I just saw so many problems with it, and I'll tell you, we had 9 tax committee members in the Senate. 6 of those members voted no on this legislation. So it would not have made it out of the Senate tax committee. But, you know, there's always reasons to vote for a bill or against a bill. Nobody's gonna be in agreement 100% of the time. We had a bill last year that most of you may not have even heard of. It's major heartburn for me and a few other senators. And that was to securitize the coal plants, the energy plants in Kansas. It is legislation that allows energy plants to shut down. They get to take out a bond. You and I get to pay for the bond, the interest, the expense of the shutdown, and we get to pay for the facility after it's closed as ratepayers. How fair is that? Yeah, did you guys even know that? No, and I don't think most legislators know that we passed it. I'm not just, you know, we just need to be aware It's so diligent, and you guys, my colleagues, they work very, very hard, I work very, very hard. Nobody knows everything about every bill, and we're not gonna agree on every bill. I'm just giving you my viewpoint on why I did not support this legislation. So, thank you.
Mark Hine, Garden City. This is for any or all of you that, just a question here. As you look back on this past legislative session, is there a moment that you can really look at that you feel that you really accomplished something? And there's a moment that stands out to you for the people of Kansas, whether that be as a whole, or as a subset for a group of individuals, industry, or so on?
Thanks, Mark. Representative Wheeler mentioned the one that I think was the most useful. For me, it was paying down the debt, making sure that those dollars didn't just wind up in growing programs, but reducing the ongoing piece. So, and knowing that yesterday the biggest chunk actually went to work was a good feeling as well, as I looked at both what we had passed and when we were lucky enough to see it go to work.
As this was my freshman session, and it was a surplus, I was excited to go down to Topeka, as I like to say, and get some of that money back to our taxpayers. So I think expanding the property tax exemption from $20,000 to $40,000 is something which I'm quite proud. As Representative Johnson said, I mean, putting away money for rainy day, for capers, for housing, these are accomplishments. We stopped taking money out of KDOT, so we'll improve our infrastructure. I serve on the Social Services Budget Committee. We did have quite a bit of federal largesse for mental health, for Medicaid, and we used that in a way that we wouldn't have ongoing expenses in the out years. But I do think we shored up the support for the neediest citizens among us, and some of that did hold up through the appropriations process. It's always difficult. You do things in committee, and then there are many other steps along the way to actually having the governor sign that budget or that bill. But I'm quite proud of what we were able to accomplish in the Social Services Budget Committee.
Thank you. That's a difficult question. It should be an easy one, but one of the things I'm probably most proud of, and you wouldn't know anything about it, is constituent services. People that call me and I'm able to help them out with issues. And that may mean with legislation or navigating the process. One bill that is a little bit obscure that came about because another senator came up to me. Actually, several of the tax bills, the one Dr. Clifford mentioned, was because a legislator asked me to help with it, was the CRP. They were the state was starting to value grassland CRP at a higher rate than what it should be. And we all know out here how much we pay in property taxes. And last year, for a couple of years, I went around the state, I treated property tax like a software project instead of a legislative issue. And we put all items on the table, from electing appraisers to no property tax at all. We did a weighted matrix, and we came up with the highest priority was about, we had over 15 items to improve property taxes. And one of them you guys will find out about, it's property tax transparency. It doesn't stop your property tax increases, but it does expose how and why they're increasing. That's all we want, is transparency. Kansans understand that we need taxes for bridges, roads and schools and stuff like that, but we don't want to see the waste. So we want that transparency. Working on that legislation, it was a team effort. Many people worked together to get it done, but I was recognized out of all the legislators in the nation as Legislator of the Year for that effort, and it is being used as model legislation in other states now.
Oh, I'm sorry, come on up.
No, that's all right.
Sorry about that, Representative.
I just want to point out that I was selected to go first because I was considered the senior representative from our area other than the senators, although I include them, and I don't know whether that's my tenure in the House or my age. I'm thinking it's probably the age, is that right? I'm going to take a different approach on this question, and I think it's a good one. And I know that we have done some good work this session in the state. My area of expertise is in the legal area. I'm on the Corrections Juvenile Justice, and I'm on the Judiciary Committee. The money issues, sometimes I rely upon other people to keep me informed, and I work hard on that. But I'll tell you, I came away from this session angry. I came away angry because I don't think that it was, the word transparent is so easy to use, but I'll just use it. Before we vote on a bill, we go into a calendaring session in the House. I don't know what they call it in this session, in the Senate. And there were bills that were coming up on the floor that we, and calendaring, had provisions that we never heard about. Like the gambling bill. The gambling bill, we knew what it was, but sometime after calendaring, it was amended by leadership to include that 20% of the state's revenue will go into a special fund to be overseen by the Financial Committee, if I remember right. It's not the full House and Senate, to build a professional stadium or arena in Kansas. Never discussed. Purely shocking when it was caught by a Democrat at the last minute. I don't care for that. I'm angry about that. The mask issue that came up late at night, on the last night, shortly before midnight. No mask requirements, no inoculation requirements, no inoculation card display requirements. We didn't even discuss that in calendaring. I don't even know that it came through a committee. And it hit the floor shortly before midnight. And it passed. It didn't provide that it's just for COVID. It's for everything. And we have a tuberculosis outbreak in Wyandotte County. I came away angry by things like that because I think that's bad legislative process and I don't approve.
Good morning. Thank you to all for coming. My name is Bob Lewis from Garden City. I've been reading in the press recently that there are a number of investment funds such as BlackRock and others that are politicizing their investment decisions. They're making investment decisions based on politics rather than the best return to their investors. And I'm wondering to what extent that infects investments by the state of Kansas. And if so, what can be and should be done about that?
So thanks for the question. The investment landscape has been changing a lot in the last 2 years in ways that I didn't expect. So the BlackRock issue is one that has really come to the fore over the last 12 to 16 months. And some of you may be familiar with that or not, but BlackRock as an investment manager has come out with a policy that says the companies in which they invest must meet their decarbonization strategy standards. And if the company doesn't have a decarbonization strategy, BlackRock, as a manager of funds, it's the largest manager, they're $9 trillion, will not invest in that company. And they've also talked about shareholder activism, where they actively vote shares against policies of the companies that are there. So there's been a few folks that have
BlackRock is absolutely an issue, but it's larger than that also. How many of you have heard of ESG? Environmental, social governance. Exactly, and that is a major problem. These financial institutions are using that rating, which define the rating. It's subjective based on somebody's opinion as to where investments should be and not be. I respectfully have a little different opinion on this. I think the legislative body is who set up Capers, who does give parameters at times, and we should take action when we see those accounts or those items not being handled with Kansas values. Capers is so critical to the state of Kansas. I think the number is high as 1 in 5 Kansans touch the Capers system. They're either currently in it or they have Capers money. And that's a very large number, so think how many Kansans that is impacting. And we absolutely have to shore up Capers. But the interesting thing is the Capers board met a couple of weeks ago. They have been estimating their returns at 7.75%. And that is understandable because they have seen that return and higher as much as 8% over the last 20 to 30 years. But any one of us can look at what's happening with our economy and know that that number is not sustainable. And so they considered lowering it to 3%, the estimate. These are the outlying future estimates. If they do that, the unfunded liability in Capers is going to go through the roof again. These are realities for the state of Kansas. We can't, what intrigues me when I was first elected, is the budget process for the state. And Capers is somewhat like this when you look at the numbers that they just pick out of the air. Well, they use, calculated estimates, but keep in mind they're estimates. And they do that with the budget process too. We have to be very aware of what we're using to estimate our future numbers for future actions, whether it be Capers or whether it be the budget. And revenue estimates, right now, they're extremely high. And people are like, well, we can't afford a tax cut. We absolutely can afford a tax cut. And let me tell you how, and this is gonna be very ugly, but think about it. You're paying more at the grocery store and at the store, aren't you? So what does that mean? That means your sales tax is gonna be a higher number. So the state is gonna be collecting more revenue based off of those increases. We absolutely need a tax cut to address that so that we can keep Kansans in their homes, so that they can purchase food and buy medicine, and so that we will keep people in Kansas instead of retiring to other states. I know I went a little bit off topic there, but it's very important on these estimates that we get it right and that we do not use Capers money and invest in ESG investments. We need to diverse from China. We've got approximately $100 million of Capers money in China. And I think at the time it was $36 million from Russia. You know that's hardly worth anything now, and we can't get it out. It's locked down. We should have never been in those countries to begin with. Kansans values do not invest in dictatorships. In fact, Representative Johnson had a testimony from a gentleman from Russia, an expert investor, and he specifically said we should never have our money in a dictatorship country. They can change the rules on a dime, and that money would be worthless or would not be available. The risk is not worth it. We can invest in Kansas solutions. We can invest in American companies and Kansas companies before we go overseas with our Kansas taxpayer money.
Real quick, I got a Capers, 2 questions. Oh, Larry Jenkins, I live here in Garden City. I visited with some school administrators over the last few weeks, and my wife's a teacher. And speaking of Capers, I think we're about ready to see a huge teacher shortage, and I don't think we're prepared for it. I teach nursing at the college. We're already seeing the results of COVID education, and it's not good. Thank God my wife doesn't listen to me because she could retire last year, and I keep telling her, get out of public education so you can double dip. Because it's just, the penalty to double dip is astronomical. And if you have a teacher shortage, why are you punishing experienced teachers by taxing them at an astronomical tax rate? I would think that you would want to keep those experienced teachers in the classroom with the impending shortage. Second, I am a nurse. Please, I beg of you to repeal the Drug Paraphernalia Act that states that you cannot have fentanyl test strips. People are dying, and if you think for 1 second fentanyl can't get into the prescription drug supply, I'm a nurse, I get drugs, I don't know where these drugs come from, because periodically they get recalled. I just trust the suppliers. Please, please, please rescind the fentanyl test strips. Kids are going to do drugs. That's the truth. If we have the ability for them to test for fentanyl, it may save a life. Thank you.
So I'll hit the capers for a moment, and then Dr. Clifford said he had a few thoughts on the fentanyl piece. So working after retirement rules, it is a pain to try and work through. Why did it happen? There are two things that are behind it, and how do you best work through it? So capers is a retirement plan, and as such, it is governed by ERISA and the tax laws that deal with retirement plans. In 1992, they instituted the 85-point rule, which allows somebody to be able to retire at their age plus years of service. When that equals 85 points, somewhere in the 55 range, folks would be able to retire, maybe 54 for those that started earlier. We got some KDOT people who start even in high school, and their retirement age is a little earlier. So, absolutely, it is a benefit. Those are the rules. They cannot be taken away or changed. The IRS issued a rule, and they said, hey, Kansas, you are welcome to do whatever you want. That is fine. But we can't determine if someone is working or retired under your system, and that's no problem. But what you have is a deferred compensation plan rather than a retirement plan. You may continue to act as you are, but we will need to tax everyone on their earnings inside the plan each year because it's a deferred compensation plan and not a retirement plan. That's what got Capers' attention to say, okay, we're also having trouble on the return side because we assume that somebody's going to retire at 60 or 62. That's not the experience, and it's meaningfully more expensive the earlier I retire in the plan. That's a challenge. It can be solved with money, but the one that was the IRS piece was the challenge to say, okay, what can we do, IRS, that appears that we are not incenting people to retire and return to work to make this a retirement plan. So the number was set. Again, you can earn up to, I think, $25,000 before it kicks in, but after that, you are penalized or a surcharge, depending on the Capers term, for the amount that is over that to say, okay, we do want to keep people, but we have to try and say, what would it be roughly for someone if you hadn't started double dipping? So to your point, I can retire and go somewhere else and I'm not double dipping. So then I lose the person. And that's the counterbalance that is hard to be able to deal with the IRS, but it was those two factors to try and say, okay, if I work until the ultimate retirement date, that's what the plan is set to do, and that's what the IRS was attempting to enforce with us, to say, you've got to be clear about when you're actually retiring, especially in the same job. So that was the sticky wicket that got worked through. It is not I don't know anyone that's satisfied with that solution, other than maybe the IRS to quit sending letters, but one that will continue to be discussed, and one that has been suspended temporarily different times, such as in COVID, to try and address major problems as they come. And you're right, there's another one on the horizon. So, but that's the background behind why the two pieces. Thanks for your question.
We kind of agreed up here to split up this two-part question, and I'll address fentanyl. And I couldn't agree more with you, Larry. I mean, we've had unprecedented overdose deaths in Kansas nationwide, and with our open border, this is just a plague upon us. It's so bad, my wife has asked me to buy Narcan in case, we even had a family member exposed. So, yeah, it's serious. You're always looking for a vehicle to get something done. Unfortunately, we're squeezed by possibly a one-day session. This session, there is a marijuana bill out there, actually, medical marijuana. I haven't been particularly in favor of it, but that might be the vehicle if that suddenly were to pop out of the Senate to the House side. But I'll guarantee you I'll pursue that in the next session.
Okay, we've got time for two more questions, and they've been spoken for. We've got one here. If Mike is going to start with the one that we got online.
Okay, the question we have online is from Chris Law. He says, I have heard recently that many legislators will not be coming back to Topeka for the final session This will likely prevent necessary work from being done. We'd like to have everyone comment on that.
Now that the Supreme Court has ruled all redistricting maps are constitutional, the Aust-Austra congressional map shocks me and dismays me. If there's anybody here interested in running for First District Congressman, move to Lawrence. It's amazing. At any rate, I am going back to the session. I think it is the responsibility of those who elect us, that we fulfill our mission. I do know, and I have friends who are not returning and considering not going. That's their choice. There is no mandate. However, if something comes up and there's a call of the house, somebody's gonna go get them if they're in the state of Kansas. They can't go outside of the state of Kansas, okay?
So this is my 12th year in the legislature. I have never missed a day of session because I'm not up there for me, I'm up there for you. And that's what we need to be in Topeka. Hopefully that will happen again. I understand extenuating circumstances, funerals, emergency room, I get it. But our obligation is to be in Topeka. The rumor now, and there's a lot of rumors that fly around the Capitol, and so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But the Senate and the House will have enough for a majority vote. We don't know yet if there will be enough for a super majority, and that's what's needed for a veto override. In order to override any of the governor's vetoes, you need 2/3 majority in the Senate and the House. That means 27 in the Senate and 84 in the House. Hopefully we'll have those numbers. We do have some legislation that she has vetoed that we do need to override. There's another way to fix it, and you guys know how to do that in November. So, thank you.
Last question.
Betsy Roberts from Penn County. Just wondering how you guys feel on term limits.
Betsy, when I ran for Congress, I signed a term limits pledge. I haven't been asked to sign any pledges in the House, the State House. I would say that voters have the ability to term limit any of us if we would just exercise it. So again, it's about showing up. You were here today, you're the ones who show up, but certainly showing up in August matters and in November. So I'm in favor of term limits. We have no legislation on that currently, but you all have that power in your hands.
We all.
I am not married to this office. I do not consider serving as the state representative for District 123 as the most outstanding achievement I have ever achieved. I am more proud, if I may say, of serving as Finney County Attorney, making the exclusive decisions for 20 years. In the House, I am one of 125. With that said, I am not married to the job. Should I be term limited out by election? So be it, by the people of my district. I have no objection if you want to set a reasonable term limit at all. But I will say one thing, that there is something to be said about having some that have experience. And we have to be careful with eliminating that and just having a bunch of youngsters, and I'm not talking in age, but I'm talking in terms of legislative experience coming in to run the House and the Senate.
I support term limits. I always have and always will. So, thanks.
Well, we've reached the end of our time for this legislative coffee. We certainly appreciate the attendance by today's panel and, of course, by those in attendance here in person and on Facebook Live. Representative democracy works because of two reasons. One, people willing to serve, so thank you to all four of you in that regard, and an electorate willing to vote and be active in civil forums and debates like this one. So thank you to all of you too. I think everybody should give themselves a round of applause. So as we part, I'll again thank our legislative coffee sponsors, St. Catherine Hospital, Compass Behavioral Health, Garden City Community College, Finney County Farm Bureau Association, and Fry Eye Associates. If you didn't get the opportunity to ask a question and some of the members are willing to stay around and answer those, you're welcome to do that. If they need to get on the road and hit something else on their schedule, please be respectful of that. Thanks again, and we will hopefully see you in July at a debate forum. Yeah.